Hi, I'm Rusty Lockett from the Carthage neighborhood of Cincinnati. He, him, his, and gay.
How long have you lived in Cincinnati?
In the general area, most of my life. We lived there. We lived in Chicago for 4 years before we moved here to be nearer to Mom's family. I grew up out in southwestern Butler County, out in Ross, Millville area.
Okay.
So about rural Ohio, where actually a couple years ago a person was shot just for the perception of being Democratic, like a block from my elementary school. Yeah, Middletown's a little backwards as well. That's why we called it Middle Tucky.
We used to call it Hamiltucky.
Hamiltucky is still that way too, yeah. It's grown up a lot, but yeah. Well, I mean, people forget about the history of that area, that actually most of the people there were from southern Kentucky and rode the rails in on the weekend, or on Sunday to work the factories during the week and then go back home on Friday night. So that's how a lot of that culture propagated up this way. Because there was like Dime, there was Ford, GM, all these various different factories, even Vernald. Yeah, it was mostly that, but like Vernald was a big deal as well, but the government was portraying the lie that it was a Purina plant because they painted the checkerboards around the water towers. But yet they were enriching uranium for the atomic bomb because it was the next stop before Oak Ridge, Tennessee, where they assembled it. And the Mound in Dayton was the same type of thing. And I think Paducah has a similar plant. Portsmouth in Ohio has a different part of that Manhattan Project stuff. I love Cincinnati history. So yeah, I've just picked up a lot of that. And well, having gone to school at Ross, which was down the street from Vernald, I grew up at the time where all that came out. And that was the time the citizens sued the government, as well as National Lead Ohio, for the contamination of the area. There was a lot of progress made for that. So they got like sewer system, public water, things like that in the area. But like a lot of negative things came out of it too, like 2 very big camps closed. Camp Ross Trails, which was a Girl Scout camp, and then was it Scott? Fort Scott, which was a Catholic camp, both very large on different sides of the plant, closed because of the perception of what was happening. But yet, if we look at the data, you have more radiation now in your basement than you do at the land there. So. But it's also fun to go to the visitor center and watch all the videos and see all the equipment. But my family has very much been a part of the Manhattan Project. Mom was on the cleanup side looking at data, and my stepfather actually got his master's in hazardous materials remediation. And actually they met at Vernald, but he's traveled around the United States as a part of the cleanup processes. Yeah, that specific thing, yeah. I mean, because I lived there, I worked there, I challenged the school and things they did there. Well, because they put in new alarms, tornado, and like if there was a release of uranium, so we would have Vernald drills in high school. And like one of the things was essentially like a tornado, put your head between your knees and crawl under your desk. And I wouldn't participate. Well, it's a heavy metal. It's 5 miles from the school. If uranium's hitting the school, that's not going to do anything. We have bigger issues. Cincinnati has been known to be overreactive. I mean, if we think about that, like the Contemporary Arts Center with the Mapplethorpe exhibit. Simon Lease, who was a judge, prosecutor, and everything else, a sheriff, overreacted and made a big brown mark for the city from all that. Now, who was it? Marion Barry, I think, or not Marion. It was I can't remember his name. Who was the coordinator of the curator of the museum? Actually got a big job after that, developing the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
So how long did you live in the Ross Millville area before you moved to Cincinnati?
Lived there for like from fourth grade to graduating high school. Went to Defiance, Ohio for 2 very long years of my life, came back, lived there another couple, 2 or 3 years, and then moved to the city. Well, when I graduated, I was 17. So then when I moved to the city, I probably would have been like my mid-20s. The first part, when I moved to the city, I lived on campus in graduate and family housing at UC. So I lived there and then bounced around on the east outer rim to Sims Township, then Loveland and Batavia, and then moved to Carthage.
You've been all around.
I've taken the east side and come back this way. Actually, I never graduated. My major was chemical dependency counseling, and my minor was IT. Picked 2 different spectrums in case one didn't work out. I had something to fall back on. Most people don't think about that. They think it's something that complements. But when I moved back, I actually worked at Vernald for a little while, and then bounced around a couple small jobs. Then worked at the university for a couple of years, and then I left the university and started doing a lot of IT work, mostly around telephone systems and designing contact center solutions. And on the side, I did do addiction counseling as well. And then on the other side of that, during the pandemic, they overhired, and now they're laying them all off. So all the Amazons, all the, like Salesforce, and a lot of the big companies like that have been doing a lot of layoffs, like thousands and thousands. It's in IT, it's one of those things you have to find a niche and excel at it, just do well naturally at it, and that's going to be what works.
Do you have a niche?
Telephone and data. So those 2 things. My mom was a data analyst, so that naturally came to me. She taught part-time at Mount St. Joe, and the former Southwestern College of Business, before it merged and became something else and then something else. She was like the dean of students there, but when she taught at Mount St. Joe, as an elementary student, I would have to go to class with her and made to do the same things they did. So I learned DBase, WordPerfect, and all these business applications at a very young age, and was able to pick them up.
The family business.
Pretty much, yeah. And, in a different way with what I do today, I very much design telephone systems and everything else it does, the chatbots, emails, screen recording, workforce management, everything around data and the customer's requirements around data and what they want to do with that data. So I'm very well able to merge that and manage all the projects in Excel. And like I originally went out to do teaching. However, I'm not doing the teaching I imagined I was supposed to be doing, or what I thought I would be doing. I ended up doing what I should be doing. And if we quit fighting it, we end up where we should be. I actually work for a small company in Chicago. We all work remotely. And I've been with them for 2 years, but we were offshoots of another group out of Chicago that got bought a couple times. And we didn't like who bought us, so we went and started our own company.
What's the name of the company?
Mnet. There's literally 8 of us. Right, 8 of us in the States, and then we have about 35 developers in the Philippines. Part of the reason I moved to Cincinnati and left home is that I was physically assaulted by my mother and left homeless. And when I tried to press charges with the sheriff, I was told I didn't have enough bruises. So I thought that that shouldn't happen to anybody. So I tried to make changes from that for other people. So I was involved in Stonewall for a little bit, and actually did a lot of time with AVOC. And at that time, actually at one point, they held during the years Pride wasn't physically held in Cincinnati, they had some semblance of Pride at the parking lot across from Pipeline at, I think, what was or is the Permits building. And they also did that at the same weekend that the court system held the drag races between Shooters and Pipeline. Well, when I moved to the city, I believe it was 98. The therapist I actually had at the time was lesbian, and I didn't know it. And so she helped guide some resources and at least lead me in the right directions to, use my natural curiosity to see what's out there. Actually, she referred me to Stonewall as like a resource dealing with the domestic violence, and then they actually led me to Women Helping Women, because they actually had the first, and if not only, in the city same-sex domestic violence. It wasn't that, but it close enough that they gave some assistance and resources, and from that, there was lots of pamphlets. Stonewall was with the community center in the same building, in the old education building on 9th Street, or 8th, whatever one of the two. And also at that time, they had the, before the internet was popular, the telephone system where you could dial in and get resources.
How long after you moved here did you start to really get involved in this kind of things?
Rather pretty immediately. Dad was an addict. And that addiction later led to a suicide 15 years ago last month. So he was pretty much too blitzed to be out of it, and knowing how the rest of the family was, that wasn't going to happen. Did come out to a couple friends, and it was like a rough process. So it was really redeveloping oneself from the beginning.
When you got here, did you feel like you could be yourself?
Yeah, I did within whatever constraints I felt comfortable in. So I did enough to grow, but not make myself anxious or ill during that process. Looking back, I don't know that I could tell you what would have been too far out, just because the world has changed so much since then. And pardon me, we've seemed to have been reverting backwards from where we were. And, like thinking about when we worked for marriage equality, a lot of people quit fighting politically because they thought that was it and we won everything. That I think was far from the truth, and I think that we're seeing that today. With Trump, it was probably a lot of, I would say, greed, and he was going to say whatever it took to find the most money. And to get that money in his pocketbooks, it didn't matter if it was going to be Republican or Democrat. He was going to work whichever way to get that money. I mean, even if we think about the ties he had to Cincinnati, I mean, like Swift and Commons over in Bond Hill, or no, Roselawn. That was a horrible start for that. And then one of the apartment complexes over there as well, he owned for a while. Yeah, the tall stack days were a good time. I enjoyed tall stacks. So actually, that was my 8th grade graduation gift, was we got to go to tall stacks.
Oh, fun!
And then it was also my senior year graduation gift, because it was every 4 years. So that happened, but the Tall Stacks organization was mismanaged, and they ran out of money. And yeah, it was even an issue in the 2000s. I think the thought of being fired was heavy on a lot of people's minds, especially if they didn't have any place to fall back on. And many of us, from the older ages, created our own families versus our birth families, families of choice. And, they didn't necessarily always have resources to be able to take care of you or help if, you lost your job. So you sometimes walked on eggshells. And depending where were in your own life or your mindset, you might have just said things anyway and got fired and dealt with it.
I feel like you personally ran into that issue?
Yeah, actually, so 2 companies ago, I was there for 9 years in Westchester, and one of the owners lived across from John Boehner. And one time I had to entertain John Boehner and all that at the building. And, having known his politics, I'm like, well, I'm obviously not going to say anything at this point. But that's when I started finding my way out as well. It did what I had to, keep money coming in, but then I was finding my exit way out. So I always describe the political climate of Cincinnati as the people were not conservative, but the money was. So and those were the ones who obviously did a lot of the talking, and mostly were from the northeast corner of the city, out in Indian Hill, or Terrace Park, or on the other end of the spectrum, I would even say Anderson Township. I think a lot of those, put their money toward things that didn't necessarily affect them, and likely people in the city took that money and worked that agenda. If we also think about Citizens for Community Values, they weren't in Cincinnati. They were actually in Sharonville. So that, all the money came from other areas than, or at least my perception is that they came from other areas than within the city. Right, yeah, so all that was happening like at the end of the 90s and the start of the 2000s. That's also when Stonewall broke up as an organization. I think actually one of the biggest issues I've seen as a part of that is something we've seen common with people in general as well as many organizations, is they don't know how to communicate and communicate effectively. And that causes a lot of issues within the organizations or within people. And, that's why you may have a dozen organizations doing the same thing, is simply because people couldn't get along and they couldn't communicate. We may say it's like a gay-only issue, but it's not. It's just more in our forefront because we see that all the time. But it happens all across the board. Stonewall had a lot of internal fighting at that point on how they wanted to approach some of the issues, like issue 12 and that.
I just couldn't agree.
Yeah, they just couldn't agree. So there was just so many fighting at the point. There's so many separations that it ended best to fold, call it a day.
Do you know how long Stonewall was active?
No, I don't know when they were created. I'm assuming the 80s, because it, I believe, came out of a informal group that created the center. Came out of. Yeah.
How long were you personally involved with Stonewall?
Yeah, probably about a couple years, and it was probably like 2 to 4 years before it folded. I think it folded like very early 2000, like 1 or 2. Yeah, actually, I ran the center for many years. Yeah, no, yeah, so I never asked to be, but I got, I was asked to join and to help, and then was elected to the board.
When were you asked to join?
Oh God, I can't remember that. I remember I was part of the board that decided to close the community center. I was the chair or the president at the time, and it was simply because people wasn't using the facility, they weren't supporting the organization, they wouldn't volunteer, and no matter all the different changes we tried to do, nothing was working. So it was just why waste the money on that when you could help other service type organizations with it. So we did that.
What year did the center close?
That was probably 7 years ago, 8 years ago, something like that. 12 or 13. Yeah, it's written somewhere. Yeah, I know it is. It's on our website. But yeah, no, and like our biggest fundraiser was Pride Night at Kings Island, and a lot of people don't know the history why that was created. Essentially, it was there were some. Originally, there was the informal First Sunday Red Shirt Day, and so there were shirt vendors in the park selling other colored shirts for the straight people who wore red and didn't want to be affiliated with that. So the park's resolution to that was to create a fundraiser for the community center as a way to make other people happy. It was a great event. When I took it over, I stripped it down and rebuilt it. And now I still have the highest attendance records of the event. And like at one point, I remember we made over $35,000 from the event. When Kings Island changed the contract and gave me less ability to what I could do, especially with like ticket prices or how I had to advertise or what I had to bring to the event, we discontinued and then Pride took it over. So the one thing I hated about the community center is it tried to be everything to everybody. And that is very hard to do. So we tried to rein that in quite a bit. There were also a lot of law changes around the time about like youth programs, as well as like even self-help programs and confidentiality and things like that. So we simply just for insurance and liability reasons stayed away from some of that. And some other organizations who had policies and larger bank accounts nationally to buy those insurance policies took over some of those programs. The other part, though, was Pride itself was a 2-day event at the time and really consumed all the operations of the center. And so then it really, for the longest time, it revolved all around Pride, and the center was an afterthought. So that was one of the changes we made right before I was elected chair was to discontinue it. The chamber picked it up, and then it became its own organization. I would say one of the biggest reasons is simply the fact that here was an afterthought. Many of the other cities, it came first. And so other organizations then came out of that. Here, all those organizations were already going, so we were ahead of the other cities in that regard. But then, they already had their own spaces, they already had, everything else. There was really no need for that concept here in reality. And all the people that have been currently, crying for community center did not necessarily support it when it was here. So that would make it difficult for me to support those people in doing that endeavor. There's many free spaces that are available to organizations to use, such as the library system has a lot of amazing resources. A lot of churches, which were sanctuary to many LGBTQ people in the 70s, we're very safe, and I understand that people may, due to spiritual bullying and that they may not want to be in those spaces. But I guess the question I would ask is, at what point does that take over versus the other needs of yourself that you want to accomplish? Which one's going to weigh better? Crossport for many years met in the basement of Our Savior, Church of Our Savior on Hollister. Metropolitan Community Church met there under one of the former bishops, who was the priest there at the time. They shared a common space there for many, many years. So there's lots of spaces out there. You just have to find what's appropriate, which can be very difficult. And then if you're catering to youth or even adult people, there are a lot of other things you had to take in consideration, like, really no private rooms. You should have windows on the doors, and a lot of these other things that many organizations don't take in consideration when they try to build their own space. And having tried to buy those insurance policies before, if you don't have those type of things, then your policy really shoots up. Or if you don't have the right policies written in your policies and procedures, that's gonna make that go up. And then you also have the cost of doing background checks and all that. And a lot of people don't take a lot of this in consideration and try to skirt around the law or other things, which is fine to a point, but at that point also you're becoming personally liable for things. Or it is a lot more involved than what a lot of people really take in consideration, including many leaders of organizations now. They talk to me about it. I try to remind them of these things, and it just goes in one ear and out the other. So I sometimes just take a step back and watch. And I think we've sort of been going, I think the city really has sort of been going back to having those small pockets. More of like a little neighborhood center, like people meeting for dinner, or having a weekly brunch, or, things like that. Like I know a couple friends and I, we'll do dinner or brunch almost once a week, just to make sure we're all in contact, we're all still alive and functioning, and just, enjoy each other. And while bars were safe places for us for many, many years, there's also many other places that have been safe for us, like River City Softball's, been a gay softball league for over 30 years. You've had like 3 or 4 different bowling leagues, and now some other sports organizations have moved in. And the one thing I really worry about in our community is at what point do we accept money to be the token charity of the time, and that we're really selling ourselves out? Like, are these organizations really providing something for us, or are we just the pretty rainbow people on the sideline to meet a checkbox? And since we've talked about Pride as well, and this is the 50th anniversary, I will say that I think we've sort of left the roots of what Pride was. We've left that it was a political action. It wasn't who can get the most corporate money, who can have the biggest party, or what entertainers you can have. It was supposed to be a time of gathering, a time of education. And I think we've really left those constraints. And I think a lot of it is just very natural by mainstreaming. But the other part is that, again, like with the marriage equality, we thought that we had everything, and we were losing so much right now. Right. I mean, are they just writing a check, or are they actually writing a check to us, or are they actually writing checks to help our causes? I definitely see that. So as like a part of my continuing journey, I go to some of the smaller prides where it is still very much like that, to fill those needs that I may have, to see people get angry and upset that their rights are being taken away and that they're being treated less than every other human.
What was your first Cincinnati Pride? What was the first one you participated in?
Other than the one that AVOC did way back when, I would say it was when it moved to the park in Northside. Because I remember they put out, when Chris ran it, they put out a plea for anyone to donate, and I gave what little I could, and they did the right thing and put everyone's name on the website, and that they donated, and it didn't matter, but that they did something.
long have you been participating in Pride since?
Pretty much about since then. Yeah, in one fashion or another, yeah.
Are you involved in like recent prides? Do you march?
I've been in the march with the sisters generally lately. I've walked with the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention for years. Before that, as the community center, we did.
Are you with the sisters?
I'm one of the founders.
Oh, I did not know.
I was actually one of the original founders of the original group that started, and I was the only one that remained out of them for
Okay, all right, back
the
up. We gotta tell this
coronation.
whole story.
Yeah, so actually, one of the reasons the Sisters in the area was created was due to fractions with the court system here. They were suspended for misogyny and a bunch of other things. And so a few of us were talking out on Broadway one night about an alternative, and that was something we found and latched onto. I really don't think that that was the time for Cincinnati to have something like that, especially with so many of the traditional religious organizations, such as like Lutheran Episcopals and Catholics, having traditional, or what we perceive as traditional habits and sisters, and that they weren't ready for something that was an alternative to that. So it failed, but before the registration with the state ended in that, we started recreating it, and it survived this long. It's actually an international organization. It's been around since 1979. Actually, we celebrate every Easter because that's when they first did a manifestation and when it was out in the community. There is a lore that Sister Mish was there with a machine gun. It was not a machine gun. It was a water soaker. So, yeah.
I hope the story's good.
Oh yeah, no, the story's always, I was actually in San Francisco for the latest anniversary, and I believe the next big one is next year. So I will be happy to go back and, recreate some of those things. And it's fun to go through that history because, like, on let's see, they have on Saturday there's the red shirt or the red dress party that's on the river. They run a boat and go through the bay. On Thursday night there's the agape meal, and just like traditional Christian churches would have, we have a spaghetti dinner. Actually, you get a poker chip that's created just for that night. The day before, let's see, Wednesday, where you may have done, or actually Friday, sorry, where you may have done the Stations of the Cross, they did something very similar in San Francisco. So they would gather in one spot and then march to certain parts of their own history and tell a short story, just as one would with the Stations of the Cross. So they've really taken a lot of the traditional Catholic, or Catholic with a small c, traditions and made them their own. And even at this point, a lot of people have turned those around or forgotten about them. Actually, today being Easter, they're all in Dolores Park in San Francisco, celebrating Hunky Jesus and having the Easter bonnet contest. When I was there, actually, one of these Easter bonnets was like an animatronic egg that opened up, and there was a ballerina, dance, like a music box.
What year was that the Cincinnati chapter formed?
Originally, I think about 10 years ago, and we've been a fully professed house for the past, 6-7 years or so. So I'm going to serve on, actually, I serve as the chair of the United Non-Privy Council, which helps new houses or cities wanting to create houses to become fully professed and to go through the process and help keep those traditions alive and help them make their own traditions. The Cincinnati chapter of the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, also known as the Abbey of the Immaculate Four-Way, based upon the skyline or the Greek chili traditions of Cincinnati. Originally was formed about 10 years ago. It didn't fully materialize until about like 4 years after. Since then, we went through the entire process, became a fully professed house, and we've been doing work here in the community since then. I was the founder of the Ohio chapter of the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. Did that for about 10 years, helped lobby to make the 988 a thing, lobbied at DC, knocking on congressmen and representatives' doors, did the same thing in Ohio. Brooklyn Still Tate started with one of our former board members a event called Suicide's a Drag, essentially a mental health fair as well as a drag show to help bring awareness of suicide in our communities. Within the organization, it actually became very nationally known, and many other chapters have modeled after that. And we were actually featured in their annual report a couple times for that. I also served on the Claremont County Mental Health and Recovery Board when I lived out that way. Yeah, no, it was all very circular, different. Last year started slowing down. I know, right? It's a first.
Wow.
Yeah, right now I'm working with the cat adoption team, fostering cats and helping getting them adopted. Yesterday I drove to Indiana and picked up a mom and 2 babies. The mom's literally 6 months old. The babies are about a week old. So right now, they're in my spare room, locked up, away from everybody else, being taken care of. We'll get those adopted in a few months. Actually, my last pair of kittens that I fostered got adopted in less than a week. I've done some medical cases, like where they need medicine or that. I was the president of the softball league for a few years.
So the River City
Yep.
Softball League? Yeah, how did that form? Or,
That was well before me.
yeah, I was going to say, that's been around a long time, hasn't it?
Yeah, that's probably been around 30 or so years. I started different, I forget which park downtown. When I joined, we were actually playing out in Cleves, Ohio, right off Hamilton Cleves Road, right off 74 there, right along the river. And eventually they moved to Kentucky for a few years and then back to River City East, where we're at currently. And they were there before at some point. I've been a part of River City softball for roughly 20 years, so about 2003. I was also the chair of the National Episcopal AIDS Coalition for a number of years until our funding source was through General Convention, and that dried up, and we knew it was happening. So we decided to fold, and what funds we had left, we gave to a spiritual retreat for those affected or infected HIV, to have a spiritual retreat for a long weekend at Canoga. I believe it's South Carolina. Yeah, so Hamilton Pride likes to tote that they were the first Pride in Cincinnati, probably about 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. However, the first Pride was in the mid-90s, I believe it was, at the Butler County Fairgrounds, and was held twice by Eartha Quake, who was later on the Jerry Springer Show, and had to have his house taken off to get health care. A lot of people don't like to know their history or don't want to accept the history. I did not know of any formal events during the late 90s, except for AVOC holding an event on Court Street across from the Old Plum Street pipeline. That was also held in conjunction with the drag races from the court. Peter Zolnowski at the time was the director of development for AVOC. he's also a known local radio personality. He's known as Peter Z on some of the stations. Well, like I said, the safe places for many gay people at that time was the bars, which also helped perpetuate the chemical dependency issues of the community. And also that was a way for them to escape any pain or that they've been experiencing. Many of them went to the churches and that did the basement leagues or whatever as their source of community. Other than that, I really didn't do much other than work. We always used to do the back then it was the pipeline, the shooters to Spurs for many years. There was carols that was good. A lot of times after those times, we'd end up at the diner on Sycamore. It used to be open 24/7 at the time, or you'd end up at the Anchor Grill. Years later, after many of those closed, on Broadway was a good place to hang out. Right. Well, another place that many people congregated was some of the coffee houses. There was the Highland Coffee House on Highland Avenue, as well as Sitwell's when it was on Clifton. I would say if they were to do anything, that they would include a lot of that history of things that happened at Pride. So do what they are doing, but also include a political part to it. The other thing, which would probably be the hardest thing, would be to find a better space. However, I don't think there is necessarily one that would be large enough to handle it. So there is that. It's been nice to watch it grow and that, but I do wish they would return to some of those political roots as we had started.
Do you feel like your point's too small? Or what do you mean by better space?
Yeah, I think it's too small, and I think the way that it's laid out, it really separates different parts of Pride out. It makes it very hard to walk and maneuver, especially with the number of people there. So a lot of people won't get to see the different sides of the ends there. Well, I was going to say at this point in the juncture, we would have to do something like when the chamber took over and put it back downtown, have your entertainment back on Fountain Square, but then block off several streets to go that way. But then also, do you have the same type of issue where it'll be too large for people to maneuver and walk? If you've been to Taste of Cincinnati or some of those type of events, it could be very difficult to walk. Right. Yeah, the one thing they also have to consider, that Pride needs to consider, is that you're not always going to please everybody that you're trying to serve.
Yeah, that's true.
And as much as it is for us, it's also as much for our allies and those who want to learn more. They've been doing a lot better than what they used to. When it was a 2-day event back at Hoffner Park, we did have a family day versus everybody else. And that the Sunday was geared toward adults and Saturday afternoon was geared toward families. It's hard to make spaces for all those type of different things. And part of that goes back to why a lot of organizations, fracture into 13 other organizations. As much as you need to meet people where they're at, they also need to make some concessions to the other degree. Otherwise, if we're always within the same little box, we as people never grow. Organizers of events have to meet criteria and rules of wherever they're being held. Like at the Cincinnati Park, not only do you have the city rules, but you have the park rules, and you got the police rules because of the parade, and all these other things, and again, insurance policies and, protesters and, how do you keep everybody safe? And
Do you miss organizing events on that scale?
Yes and no. I was actually talking about that with somebody that I once in a while I do miss organizing large events or producing a large event like that.
Yeah. But also they can be large headaches too.
Very much. It can very well be a large headache, and when it is a large group like that, you have a lot of competing personalities, which makes it very hard to do your job. And the one thing that a lot of people have a misnomer about is whoever is the chair or president has the least power to do anything, but they have the most responsibility. I think the biggest part that I enjoyed was the connections with other people and seeing how you could work together or do something. Like, all right, you give me space to advertise this event and I'll give you space to do the same type of thing. Sometimes just finding different ways of being creative outside of the normal means and that.
Yeah, I think, and like, seeing your event come to fruition and seeing that one glorious day where all your hard work comes to a head. And
well, and then on the other side of that, you also have you put in 12 months of work into this event that will last one day, and nobody talks about it more than a week later.
I think that's right.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I've seen it for years. That many of these events are doing something that is memorable for that, for a large group of people, memorable for a large group of people. Individual people will sometimes take away some magic, and normally that's because they made a personal connection with somebody else that sparked that. I would say the really big thing would be to do something out of the box that no one else is doing. And that could be so many different things, but they have to find something that really makes it unique to them. And I think that so many prides are just copycats of each other in that regard, especially, taking all the corporate money and just being a poster child for the rainbow and, checking that box that we did something for diversity and inclusion versus, doing other things. Right, and some of the sponsors will, put criteria that you can't do this or this, or that you have to do that or that, which just adds additional guidelines, which makes it even harder to put on events.
Yeah. From the time that you got here in '98 to now, a little more than a 20-year period, do you feel like things have significantly changed or improved for gay people?
I think overall they have improved, but there's always room for improvement. I think like one of the biggest examples was is ours. For many years, bars have been our sacred spaces, and bachelorette parties or the like want to come in and make spectacles and that of our space, and it's like we don't go to yours and do that. So there's like the respect level there that obviously you don't think of as the same, but you want to take advantage of our safe spaces and make them not safe. But then to counterpoint that, I'd say that the safe or those spaces need to take in consideration what it takes to continue to make it a safe space and not worry about just the dollar.